Thank you. Good afternoon. Great to be here. My name is George Abernathy. I am the Chief Revenue Officer for FreightWaves and BITA. BITA is the Blockchain and Transport Alliance. That's the level of credibility that I have to participate this afternoon as your moderator. BITA was formed just under a year ago. It started as the Blockchain and Trucking Alliance, turned into the Blockchain and Transport Alliance to be more geographically diverse and incorporate a greater amount of the supply chain. With that, we have 422 companies that have are members, and they span shippers, people who manufacture and ship goods. We have folks who carry those things from point A to point B, and we have companies like some of those who are on the panel who actually will use their expertise to provide technology and services to do that. So I'll be the moderator. My expectation is you're going to hear my voice very, very little, and that's really good because these guys all like to hear the sound of their own voices, and that's a good thing for you. So let's go down the line, and then we'll get this going.
Hi guys, I'm Kylan. I'm working on a project called Flux, and we're based out of Boulder and Israel. Started about 2.5 years ago out in Israel, and we're creating an environmental global protocol for data standards. So basically, we're creating a way for air, water, soil, satellites, imagery, drone data to all be contributed to a global data co-op and then glean insights from those intra-realm data sets and make real progress on entrenchable problems and create this future where we can sustainably feed a planet of 10 billion people by 2050 without completely spoiling our natural complex ecosystems.
That's very cool. I just moved freight. I'm Eric Remple. I'm the CIO of Redwood Logistics. We are a Chicago-based third-party logistics full-service transportation company. So we've got a brokerage where we procure capacity in the marketplace and then we sell it to our customers. We have our own trucks going all over the country. And we have a supply chain solutions group which does supply chain engineering. We have SaaS transportation management software, and we have a supply chain integration platform to connect all of our customers to essentially whatever they want. We engineer their supply chains for them.
What's going on, everybody? I'm Chris Kirchner, founder and CEO of Slink.io. We are a supply chain automation platform using some cool technologies like blockchain, AI, machine learning. We are cloud-based. We're a SaaS company. We provide software to a lot of people in his space, large freight forwarders, shippers, mostly in the Fortune 1000. We operate in North America, Europe, and Asia, and are expanding in all those geographies. So he moves stuff. We help people track stuff that's moved. Very simple.
My name is Zaki Manian. I'm the executive director of the Trusted IoT Alliance. We have about 50 members operating across a vast number of industries, but really focused on the intersection of IoT and blockchain and how this emerging space is sort of defining itself.
So I'm going to try to ask something provocative and then get the heck out of the way and let you guys knock this one around for a little bit. But Zaki, let's start. You've got 50 members. In our prep, we talked about that you're not in this, just for the membership. You're in this for trying to provide value. I think the supply chainers in the middle might wonder out loud where blockchain is providing them any level of value at this point. But speak to what your goal is at this point for the Alliance.
Yeah, so the goal of the Trusted IoT Alliance was really, we've seen sort of throughout 2017, we saw a fairly spectacular amount of fundraising and new entities' interests. Almost all of the companies in the Alliance are probably under 2 years old. So there's an enormous mass of startup companies in the Alliance. And what I think the purpose of the Alliance is to provide some level of support and guidance towards finding the entry point solution for IoT and blockchain. And to a large extent, like even the entry point solution, the wedge into the market, even for IoT, has been somewhat elusive. So it's also this elusive problem of where IoT and blockchain together sort of wedge into the market. What is the go-to market that is enabled by IoT somewhat uniquely? And so we've sort of been seeing the discovery process for that play out over the course of the year, but it is, to be honest, fairly slow moving. There have been a lot, like companies that have promising use cases have been, have found fundraising challenging. Companies that did a lot of fundraising in 2017 are still trying to sort of define their identity and their sort of wedge into the market.
Eric or Chris, is there somewhere in what you're doing that wedge that Zaki has tried to find? Is there somewhere in the supply chain that wedge exists? You've found that value, or is it as elusive as he's describing?
So I guess we started a little differently than a lot of software companies. And I think when you look at this from a technology standpoint, people fundraise tokens or what have you with blockchain, or trying to find a way to fit blockchain or wedge blockchain into a problem that they didn't know what that problem was. We actually started the other way around and spent 6 months, 5 months, 6 months doing nothing but talking to customers, saying, hey, okay, everyone has a list of the biggest problems in their business, especially if you're selling B2B like we are. Every enterprise, they have, okay, here's the 10 things that suck in our business that we need to fix. Now, do they solve all 10 of them every year? No, but they at least try to solve 1 or 2 of them. And so we just had a lot of frank conversations with people, not selling them anything, just basically playing therapist. Hey, what's bad in your business that we could build something to solve? Right. And we kind of backed into blockchain being a part of that solution. So we haven't had necessarily a wedge issue, because we started with a problem and said, okay, if we can fix this, people will pay for it. And so we've had success because we aren't searching for a problem. We started with the problem and built a solution.
Yeah, I've got a similar take on that, which is, we have a income statement that we have to look at, right? So it's not speculative, it's not on an ICO, although, there's some days at the office that we just say, screw it, maybe we should just do an ICO and spin off our technology department. But, I think the reality is the industry itself, and specifically logistics and supply chain, is so fragmented, it's so broken apart, there's so many companies out there, so many service providers, ranging from, companies that have IoT embedded in their tires for pressure sensing and finding accidents, or predicting accidents, all the way to companies that are running on Excel spreadsheets. And they're not changing much with the exception of the ELD mandate. But I think that in terms of blockchain, which, throwing it out there, I'm a huge proponent of. We've invested in it in our company. We're doing proof of concepts. We're finding ways to connect our customers to it. We're creating a protocol called Business to Blockchain, where we take our customer systems and we get them ready to connect to probably some killer applications that are going to be created by a lot of folks here. But people in the blockchain space don't know a damn thing about supply chain, and people in the supply chain space don't know a damn thing about blockchain. And it's just the nature of where things are right now, and that might be a strong statement, but there's so much intellectual property on both sides that has yet to mesh. When it does, things are going to get really, really cool. But right now, it's pre-embryo stages, in my opinion.
Kind of, do you see Flux playing a role here in some of the projects that you guys might be working on? Absolutely.
So an obvious first application of this environmental data protocol is agriculture, and being able to optimize, improve a grow from start to finish. So optimally, what seed should you plant in a quickly drying sub-Saharan region that also regenerates topsoil? And then if you track that throughout its entire grow, placing optimal fertilizer and using water only when needed through drip irrigation, and you can actually greatly increase the harvest rates. But you also are tracking it, its growing conditions, and then you have an origin, a provenance basically, and that's where we turn it off to our partnerships that can build supply chain solutions on top of that. So if you are buying single-sourced Arabica beans that's fair trade, and even with spectrometry sensors embedded in the future that can verify organic status along the way, that's where that value add from transparency and supply chain really comes in. But we're not building those supply chain solutions because they are so varied across all these different industries.
So who are the partners that you will hand that off to? And I've got a couple of companies here that are in different sections. That would they be someone that you could work with, or how would we find the right partners?
Right. So I mean, you need there's a lot of moving parts to get a banana from Chile to the United States, and that involves shipping, freight, and storing that in refrigerated containers. But one of the things we really want to do is deconstruct and localize the food supply chain. So one of the main KPIs we're measuring over time is, how can we reduce the time from harvest to consumption? Because right now, you can go into a store, even like at Whole Foods, buy an apple that was picked 10 months ago, kept in cold storage, and by that point, it's basically just, Blake's laughing right now because you're basically just eating fiber and sugar at that point. But if you could know that the apple was harvested by a local grower just a week ago, a couple days ago, and greatly reduce the fossil fuel intake, as well as keep the micronutrient level in the food supply. That's weird.
There's got to be a new quote in there: an apple a day is no longer good for you. Or there's got to be something in there that I'm grasping for that I'm not doing a good job.
An apple a day picked 5,000 miles away.
10 months
Makes
ago.
yeah.
10 months ago is simply now sugar and fiber. So
Yeah.
so why bother? Eric, talk to me a little bit about IoT within Redwood. Are you seeing, if you were looking at it, you've been there long enough, 5 years ago, 2 years ago, today, has the progress been made that you had expected to, and where do you see it 2 years and 5 years downstream?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about this, before we went up here a little bit about, what RFID was supposed to do, a long time ago. But, there's space for it. There's always space for this technology, whether it's IoT, whether it's blockchain, whether it's hybrids. The question is, what kind of business value and ROI do you get from it? Not to be this, business-centric person at a tech conference, because I'm definitely techie first, but if we have customers, and we have a bunch that are, for example, in agriculture, right? So we've got agriculture customers that they want all of these sensors and all of this data, and they don't know the first thing about how to hook them up and how to get that information cross-referenced against their actual purchase orders and sales orders. And so that's what we do. We find neat organizations that have this type of technology, or they come to us, or a lot of times they go directly to our customers and they say, hey, we can help you with your demand planning, or we can look at soil health, and we can look at the visibility of in-transit cargo. But what we do, and this is where we see the gap between where blockchain is for financial today and where it could be potentially for supply chain, and that delta is just pure ROI. So leveraging the IoT sensors, and if they can save $10 million a year because they're making better choices about what to plant based on soil levels, they'll buy that. And they'll buy that and ask us to integrate it, and we'll connect it into their supply chain. And it's trusted because we're paying an organization to give us that data on those devices that we believe in. And if that company doesn't do a good job, we'll find another one. Once it becomes commoditized in a future world where we can imagine blockchain, you pick what service you want, you pay for it with the tokens, and you can get this type of data from anywhere. That's super cool, but I don't think we're remotely there yet.
Feel the same way?
Yeah, and
Even more enthusiastic?
well, I guess my feelings are all driven by what I hear from customers. That's my job. My co-founder's the product guy. He leads that and handles the engineering side. My job is to talk to customers and bring information back. Talk to the people who've already bought our platform, talk to the people we're working with in some sort of POC or pilot standpoint, and then talk to prospective customers. Right. And that's a lot of what I'm hearing is the problem is the solutions being presented are great theoretically, but they're not grounded with operational knowledge of what's realistic or what's possible in a business. And the biggest thing that factors into any buying decision, and I come more from the operations side, I'm not a software background person, is if I'm in company ABC and I'm looking to buy software, I have two criteria for my decision. Is this going to get me promoted or is this going to get me fired? And when you look at a nascent technology that's very risky, that's not super established, that has questionable ROI, it's hard to say, okay, is this worth risking my career on? Or if you're higher up in the organization and you have P&L responsibility, am I willing to take the hit or let our stock, if you're a publicly traded company, am I willing to let the stock take a hit for this massive investment across my organization that I can't draw a straight line to what we're going to get in return?
In
And
fairness, if you add blockchain to your name, your stock doubles.
that's true. Yeah. Well, then you don't need to buy the solution. You just add blockchain to your name, and you're good to go, right? But you know that I think is where the kind of the disconnect is, and it's not leading to this adoption, or that's leading to hesitation. Is okay, you have this great idea in theory, and it may work in a digital proof, but when I put it into operation, is it going to work? Is it going to work in my warehouse in Bangladesh? Is it going to work in all corners of my organization? You know, with our customer set, because they're large multinational organizations, if we can't answer that question definitively and draw a straight line, yes, it'll work here because of A, B, and C, the conversation ends pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said about IoT and why it hasn't hit into supply chain, and part of it is the value is certainly there if you can connect it. And we're in an industry where, you know, I don't know how many in this room are familiar with EDI, but, you know, everyone here knows what APIs are and how to connect and how to, you know, use nouns and verbs when programming computers. EDI is the dominant way that businesses connect in a B2B world in the supply chain space. And all you can do there is send a tender, send a warehouse update. With IoT, there aren't standards around how these big, I don't want to say the word dumb, but I'm going to say it, big dumb businesses can consume this type of data. You know, they have these legacy systems that are these Fortune 50 companies that are running on green screens that are waiting for a single document that they can accept so that they can integrate it into how they're going to perform their business operations. And then they look at IoT and they're like, wow, that could change everything. And then they talk to IT, and IT doesn't have the slightest clue as to where to integrate it into their business value prop. And that is a challenge where I think it's going to take a little bit longer, not because the solution isn't right. These solutions are amazing, but it's going to take time for these businesses to actually change the way they look at technology, and specifically how to adopt it without risk. You know, another thing we're talking about is these large ERP implementations that go sour. They just spent $10 million trying to get a system off the ground, and it's still not working. And now they're going to try and spend another few $1 million to do a digital transformation, to be API-led, to consume this data, build a pipe. They're not going to do it.
No, and that's on the low end, $10 million. I mean, you know, we have customers that are in the middle of $200+ million rollouts, and they're not going to scrap that. You know, I had a large Fortune 500 company tell me to switch software, their internal ERP software. It cost them north of $300 million. They're just not going to do that. And so, how do they handle the data? How do they understand the data? How do they make use of it and turn it into BI or business intelligence? Where's that connection? That's missing. And if companies aren't strong with that and can draw a line, yeah, technology is great, but if it doesn't have a business application, you're just not going to sell it. And all tokens and tokenomics aside, if you're selling into business, that's all that matters. They don't care about anything else. You could have a great PowerPoint, but it doesn't matter.
Zaki.
Well, so I think I don't want to take your role, but I have a question for you guys. Like, and I think a lot about this a lot. Like, what are the signals going to be that enough time has gone past, that enough of these ancillary processes? Like, how do you know, and what do you look for?
Yeah, if I knew the answer to that,
Yeah.
I wouldn't probably be sitting up here. I'd be on a beach somewhere. But it's interesting because a lot of people are still using Microsoft Excel. Like, we aren't even talking about software. So how much time has to elapse? Well, how long have decent software systems been out for business that handle processes better than Microsoft Excel? You know, it's been a long time, right? But major businesses, high-tech businesses, are still running their supply chain with Microsoft Excel. And so how much time, or how do you know a signal? I think the great thing that blockchain has done for IoT, for digitization as a whole, is it sparked interest and started conversations and gatherings like this, and even more on like kind of the business or P&L leader side to talk about these things. And I think that's the first step and the first signal that the time is coming, is now there's conversations. And I also think Amazon's a lot to thank for that, because they've just scared the shit out of everybody.
I'll take a stab at that question, because I think it's a great one. I think shrinking margins. When there's a fear that your competition is doing something better than you are, and you discover that they're using this device that lets them make 10% more per quarter, I want that. And someone at the boardroom is going to say, I want that. Get me the thing that turns on, right? And then all of a sudden, oh, did you hear that such and such company had it, right? And then you have this tipping point that eventually happens, and everyone wants this technology. And you see it, there's a lot of new companies in supply chain that are doing this kind of stuff, and they're gaining great traction because they're making it easy to consume, they're making it easy to get this data, and everyone wants it. And then they're like, I want it. Sometimes they even spend money on it. And then they say, oh, we can't integrate it yet. And then they have to go back to the drawing board.
Which is, just one second, which is different than you quickly described the, when we were thinking about, the chips that, back in the day, that was being mandated by certain companies as opposed to I'm using it, I'm doing something better than the other guys, and then the dominoes start to fall.
Right.
So
That was their efficiency. That wasn't our benefit.
That's right. That's exactly right. Go ahead.
Yeah, just from the consumer side as well, I would like to see the dominoes start to fall, and I think they will once you start have one or a couple large companies provably open up their supply chain to be transparent, to show working conditions, to show environmental effects of the entire supply chain, of their means of production. Once that starts to happen, main competitors, that'll become like the status quo almost, and you'll have to open up. Businesses are going to have to become more transparent, whether they like it or not. The ones that don't openly do that, they'll get hacked more and more, and they'll pay the price for it.
They will, but who's going to be the first business to open the kimono? And it's scary because a lot of these businesses don't know what will be exposed when they open it up.
I know a lot that would go out of business if they did expose.
They're big evil businesses, but it's true, right? And they aren't perfect, and they're scared to open up to this world of distributed ledgers and visibility around everything, because most of these companies don't have good enough dashboards where they can see what's going on inside of their own company. You mentioned BI earlier. If I could tell you how many companies I've met with that have said, we have a data warehouse and a data lake, and we've got BI and analytics and data science, they have no idea what is going on in their company because they haven't figured out how to be data-driven yet, so they don't know what's going to be exposed.
We do only have a couple of minutes. I've got like 17 questions that I could ask, but I know that there's probably somebody out there that has one that's just, they're dying to ask, and if you don't ask real quickly, then I'm going to jump in myself. Anyone? Go ahead.
Well, I think it's possible that if we educate the consumers and they demand that these people be transparent because they want to know where their meat comes from and things of that nature, that might drive them to do it. And the other thing is, from a perspective of food producing, if we can teach the companies that you might want to get interested, that if they can locate where that food comes from, they don't have to throw away 40 billion eggs. They can just throw away the ones that came from that plant. So that would be an incentive for them possibly too.
Totally.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. Thank you for doing that. Zaki, I'll ask you, would the Alliance take up that initiative to try to lead something like that?
So consumer education is a potential wedge into this space. Some of the members of the Alliance have these massive war chests to deploy, and that might be one of the ways in which they do this. In the way you move the market. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I think, the answer to my question is like, it does continue to feel like we're on the cusp of something big happening here, but we're still on the cusp of it. Like, we haven't crossed that. The entry point into where it becomes both a little clearer what IoT and blockchain will be, and how it will evolve, and the narrative still makes sense. The narrative of doing this still makes a lot of sense. It's just we're clearly snapshotting a moment where reality hasn't fully emerged yet.
I think you're starting to see that. I mean, you already have like fair trade certification, organic certification, right? And there's a consumer surplus that's being paid for that, which is kind of like that trust mechanism, but the blockchain just scales that a lot quicker because you don't need actual manual certification and verification going out there. It's in the data.
Does you'd mentioned Whole Foods earlier, and that my apple that no longer is going to be what I was hoping for it to be. Does it give you any pause that Whole Foods is Amazon, and that potentially transparency may have taken a step backwards?
Certainly, but I think Whole Foods isn't exempt from this opening of transparency that all companies will be forced to reckon with.
Sure, absolutely. We're at 3-0, so I want to thank the panel. Appreciate it. Thanks for everybody for being here. Thank you very much.